crying would not stop. Elena pressed her silk pillow over her ears, trying to block out the sound that had been haunting her mansion for weeks. It was past midnight, and the woman's sobs echoed through the empty corridors like the wails of a tortured spirit. Tonight, the crying was louder than ever, more desperate, more broken. She threw off her expensive Egyptian cotton sheets and stepped onto the cold marble floor. Her bare feet made no sound as she crept down the grand staircase of the mansion Victor had bought for her. The house was too big, too empty, filled with luxury, but devoid of warmth or love. The crying was coming from the east wing, a part of the house she had never explored. Victor had told her it was used for storage, nothing important. But tonight, something pulled her toward that forbidden area, like an invisible rope around her chest. The hallway was darker here, older. Her heart pounded as she followed the sound of weeping until she reached a heavy wooden door. The crying was coming from behind it, muffled but unmistakably real. Elena tried the handle, locked. The crying stopped suddenly, as if whoever was inside knew she was there. "Hello," she whispered. No answer. Fear and curiosity warred in her chest. She ran back to the kitchen and grabbed a hammer from the toolbox Victor kept there. Her hands shook as she returned to the door and began pounding at the old lock until it finally gave way. With a rusty screech, the door swung open, and Elena stepped into a room that made her blood freeze in her veins. Candles burned everywhere, casting dancing shadows on the walls. In the center of the room sat a small table covered with red cloth. On the table was a framed photograph of her own face, smiling back at her with the same hopeful expression she had worn on her wedding day to Victor. But it was what sat beside the photograph that made her legs give out beneath her. A clear glass bottle, old and thick, with a heavy iron padlock chained around its neck. Inside the bottle, floating in some dark liquid, was another photograph of her face. The image looked distorted through the glass, her smile twisted into something grotesque. Elena crawled closer, her hands shaking. Around the table were more bottles, dozens of them, each containing a photograph of a different woman. Beautiful women, young women, all smiling the same hopeful smile she recognized from her own face. Some of the bottles were covered in dust, as if they had been there for years. The smell hit her then, the metallic stench of old blood mixed with something rotten and sweet. Calabashes filled with dark red liquid sat between the bottles, and strange symbols were carved into the wooden table beneath the red cloth. Elena scrambled backward, her scream caught in her throat. She had stumbled into something evil, something that explained why she had never been able to have children, despite 3 years of trying, why Victor only visited her once a week, why she felt so empty, despite all her wealth. She was not Victor's wife. She was his prisoner, trapped in a bottle like a genie, her life force slowly being drained away. Many years ago, when Elena was still young and hopeful, she had lived in Riverside Village with her carpenter husband Tom and their 2 sons, Michael and Luke. Life had been hard but honest. Tom worked with his hands, building furniture and fixing roofs, while Elena sold bread and vegetables at the market. They had little money but plenty of love. Everything changed the day Victor Eze came to their village during his election campaign. Elena had been washing clothes by the stream when her son Michael ran to tell her about the important visitor. She had followed the boy to the village square, curious to see the politician everyone was talking about. Victor was unlike any man she had ever seen. While the men in her village were weathered by hard work and poverty, Victor gleamed like polished gold. His suit was perfect. His shoes shone like mirrors, And when he smiled, Elena felt something stir inside her that had been sleeping for years. "My beautiful people," Victor had called out to the crowd, "I have come to end your suffering. When I am elected, every village will have electricity, good roads, clean water." The crowd cheered, but Elena barely heard them. Victor's eyes had found hers across the square, and she felt as if he could see straight into her soul. After his speech, Victor had approached her personally. "What is your name, beautiful sister?" "Elena," she had whispered, suddenly aware of her faded dress and work-worn hands. "Elena," he repeated, taking her hand in both of his. "You deserve so much more than this hard life." Tom had appeared then, suspicious and protective, but Victor's words had already planted a seed in Elena's heart, a seed that would grow into a hunger for more than her simple life could offer. Over the following weeks, Victor sent messengers with gifts and letters. He promised Elena a life of luxury, a beautiful house in the city, fine clothes, and everything her heart desired. He told her she was too beautiful, too special to waste away in a poor village. Elena knew Victor was married, knew he already had a family, but he promised her that she would be his special woman, the one who truly understood him. He painted pictures of a life so beautiful that her current existence seemed like a prison in comparison. The final temptation came when their youngest son, Luke, fell sick with fever. The village medicine man could do nothing, and they had no money for a doctor in the city. Elena watched her child burning with fever and felt helpless rage at their poverty. That night, Victor's messenger brought not just a letter, but a bundle of money, enough to pay for the best doctors, enough to save Luke's life. "Honorable Victor heard about your son's illness," the messenger said. "He wants to help, but he hopes you will consider his offer seriously. A woman like you should not have to watch her children suffer because of poverty." Elena used the money to save Luke's life, and in return, she felt she owed Victor everything. When he sent a car for her the following week, she climbed in without looking back. She told herself she was doing it for her children, to give them a better future. Tom had been heartbroken, begging her not to leave, but Elena's mind was made up. She was tired of being poor, tired of struggling, tired of watching her children go hungry. Victor had kept his promises at first. He installed her in a beautiful mansion in the city, bought her expensive clothes and jewelry, gave her a car and a driver. For the first time in her life, Elena lived like a queen, but the luxury came with a price she hadn't understood. Victor visited her only once a week, spending the rest of his time with his real family. Elena found herself alone in the big house, surrounded by beautiful things, but empty of love. She had maids and drivers, but no real friends. She had wealth, but no purpose. The loneliness was crushing, but worse was the guilt that ate at her every day. She had abandoned her children, left them without a mother for the promise of riches. She tried to send money back to the village, but Tom refused to accept it. He had moved away with the boys, too ashamed to remain where everyone knew his wife had left him for another man. Years passed. Elena tried desperately to have a child with Victor, thinking a baby would fill the emptiness in her heart. But month after month, her womb remained empty. Doctors told her she was healthy, that there was no medical reason she couldn't conceive. But somehow, she knew the truth was darker than any medical explanation. And now, staring at her own face trapped in that cursed bottle, Elena understood why her womb had remained barren, why her life had felt so empty despite all the wealth surrounding her. Victor had not made her his mistress. He had made her his victim. Elena ran from that cursed room as if the devil himself was chasing her. She threw on the first clothes she could find and fled into the night, not stopping until she reached the small church at the edge of town. Pastor Williams opened the door in his night clothes, his eyes wide with concern when he saw her tear-streaked face. "My child, what has happened?" Elena collapsed into the church pew, her whole body shaking. "Pastor, I need to tell you something terrible, something evil." Pastor William sat beside her, his face filled with compassion. "Tell me everything, my daughter. The Lord is listening." Elena took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice trembling. "There is a man named Victor Eze. He is a politician who came to my village years ago. He promised me wealth and luxury, and I left my husband and children for him." The pastor listened carefully, his hands folded in prayer. "He gave me a mansion, cars, jewelry, everything I thought I wanted. But I could never get pregnant, no matter how hard I tried. Tonight, I heard crying in the house. I followed the sound and broke into a locked room." Elena's voice broke. "Pastor, what I saw there, it was not of this world." "Tell me what you saw, child." "There was a table covered in red cloth. On it was my photograph in a frame, but beside it," Elena shuddered, "there was a glass bottle with a heavy padlock around its neck. Inside the bottle was another picture of me, floating in some dark liquid that smelled like old blood. And there were dozens of other bottles, each with a different woman's picture inside." Pastor Williams's face grew grave as he listened. He closed his eyes and prayed silently for wisdom. "Pastor, what does this mean? Why would he do such a thing?" The old pastor opened his eyes and Elena saw deep sadness there. "My daughter, what you have described is an ancient form of spiritual bondage. This man has not just taken your body and given you material things. He has captured your very soul." Elena's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "The bottle with your photograph inside, sealed with a padlock. This is how dark practitioners trap a person's destiny. Their luck, their ability to bear children, their very life force. When you accepted his gifts and left your family, you unknowingly made a spiritual contract with him. He now owns your soul, your womb, your future. But I never agreed to such a thing. Sometimes we make agreements without words, child. When we choose material wealth over love, when we abandon our families for selfish gain, when we allow greed to guide our hearts, we open ourselves to these dark forces. This Victor has used your desires against you." Elena wept bitterly. "How do I break free, Pastor? How do I get my life back?" Pastor William shook his head sadly. "I have never encountered such powerful darkness before. But I know this. Those who make such bargains find that everything they touch afterward turns to destruction. Your attempts to rebuild your life will fail. Those who help you will suffer. This is the price of selling your soul. Is there no hope for me? Only God knows, my child, but the damage you have done to your family, to yourself, to your very spirit, this cannot be easily undone. You must prepare yourself for a very difficult path ahead." Elena spent the rest of the night in the church, praying and crying until dawn broke over the city. When the sun rose, she knew she could never return to the mansion. She gathered what little money she had hidden away and bought a bus ticket back to her village. But it was too late to simply go home. The bus pulled into Riverside Village as the sun set behind the hills. Elena stepped off with her single suitcase and looked around at the place she had once called home. Everything looked smaller, poorer, more desperate than she remembered. But it also looked real in a way her mansion never had. She walked to the spot where her old house had stood and found it empty, the land overgrown with weeds. Neighbors she once knew crossed the street to avoid her, whispering behind their hands. Word had already spread. that the woman who abandoned her family had returned. Elena rented a small room from an old woman who didn't recognize her and tried to start over. She attempted to sell vegetables in the market, but every day her produce would rot before evening. She tried to get work as a seamstress, but the sewing machine would break whenever she touched it. Men who showed interest in her would suddenly lose their jobs or fall ill. Families who hired her as a house cleaner would find their belongings mysteriously breaking. Children would fall sick after eating food she prepared. The villagers began to whisper that she was cursed, that she brought bad luck wherever she went. Mothers pulled their children away when she walked past. Shop owners refused to sell to her. Elena realized that Pastor Williams had been right. Victor's curse was real, and it followed her wherever she went. The next day, Elena received a message that chilled her to the bone. A young man came to her room with a folded paper. "From Honorable Victor," he said, and disappeared before she could ask any questions. Elena opened the letter with trembling hands. "My dear Elena, I can see you went looking at what does not concern you. I don't need you anyway. I already got what I wanted from you. Enjoy the rest of your life. Victor." Elena's hands shook as she read the words. He had known she would find the room. He had wanted her to discover his dark secret. Her escape had not been an escape at all. It had been part of his plan. Desperate to make amends with her family, she tried to find her former husband and children. She learned that Tom had moved to the city after she left, unable to bear the shame of his wife's abandonment. Using what little money she had left, Elena traveled to the city to find him. It took weeks of searching, but she finally learned that Tom had become successful. The heartbreak of losing his wife had driven him to work harder than ever. He had started a furniture business that grew into one of the most successful in the city. He lived in a big house in an expensive neighborhood with his new wife, Sarah, a kind woman who had helped him heal from Elena's betrayal. Elena stood outside Tom's mansion, a house even grander than the one Victor had given her, and watched through the gates as her former husband returned from work. He looked younger somehow, happier, dressed in fine clothes and driving an expensive Range Rover. Beside him sat Sarah, a beautiful woman who managed his business affairs and had made him wealthy beyond his dreams. Tom had two new children with Sarah, a boy and a girl, who ran to greet him as he stepped out of his car. Elena's heart broke as she watched the family she could have had if she hadn't been so greedy. When Tom saw Elena at his gate, his face hardened. The love that had once shone in his eyes was replaced by cold indifference. "What are you doing here?" he asked, not even getting out of his car. "Tom, please," Elena begged through the gate. "I want to apologize. I want to make things right." "Make things right?" Tom's voice was bitter. "You abandoned your children. You left us for money and luxury. Now you want to come back. I made a terrible mistake. I was foolish, selfish. Please forgive me." Tom looked at her for a long moment, and Elena saw not hatred in his eyes, but pity. "Elena, we don't need you anymore. We built a good life without you. My sons call Sarah their mother now. They're doing well. Michael is studying engineering. Luke is in Canada on a scholarship. They don't need the woman who walked away from them. Please, just let me see them. Let me explain." "No." Tom's voice was final. "You made your choice years ago. Live with it." He drove through his gates, and Elena heard them clang shut behind him like the sound of a coffin closing. She stood there until dark, hoping he would change his mind. But the lights in the house eventually went out, and she was left alone in the darkness. Elena returned to the village more broken than when she had left. She tried to rebuild her life, but the curse that followed her made everything impossible. Crops withered at her touch, Animals fell sick when she was near. Even the weather seemed to turn bad whenever she stepped outside. The villagers no longer whispered about her. They shouted their accusations openly. They blamed her for every misfortune that befell the village. When children fell ill, when crops failed, when businesses struggled, they pointed their fingers at Elena. She brought evil back with her, they said. She made a deal with dark forces, and now we all suffer. Elena tried to defend herself, tried to explain that she was as much a victim as anyone else. But who would believe her? She was the woman who had abandoned her family for money, who had chosen wealth over love. In their eyes, she deserved whatever curse had been placed on her. Men tried to cut her, drawn by her fading beauty, but disaster followed every relationship. One suitor lost his job the day after their first date. Another fell from his bicycle and broke his leg after walking her home. A third had his shop catch fire after buying her dinner. Word spread quickly that Elena was cursed in love as well as life. No man would come near her. No family would associate with her. No business would hire her. The final humiliation came when the village chief called a meeting to discuss Elena's presence in the community. "This woman brings bad luck," the chief declared. "Since she returned, nothing goes well for anyone. Our children are sick, our crops fail, our businesses struggle. She must leave." "Where can I go?" Elena asked, her voice breaking. "This is my home. You gave up the right to call this place home when you left your family," the chief said coldly. "You are no longer welcome here." Elena packed her few belongings that night and left Riverside Village for the last time. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to, no hope for redemption. She wandered from town to town, city to city, but the curse followed her everywhere. Nothing she touched would prosper. No one who helped her would escape misfortune. She was a walking disaster, a human plague that brought suffering wherever she went. In one town, she tried to work as a house cleaner, but every family that hired her would find their lives falling apart. Children would fall sick, husbands would lose their jobs, wives would have accidents. Elena would be blamed and sent away. In another city, she attempted to sell food by the roadside, but her cooking would make people sick. Her vegetables would rot. Her customers would have bad luck after eating her meals. Men who tried to help her would find their businesses failing, their health declining, their families turning against them. Elena learned to avoid forming any relationships at all, knowing that her curse would destroy anyone who came too close. Years passed, and Elena aged rapidly, worn down by guilt, loneliness, and the weight of her curse. Her beauty faded, her health declined, and her spirit broke completely. She became a wanderer, moving from place to place like a ghost, never staying long enough to cause too much damage to the innocent people around her. Some say she still wanders the country, a cautionary tale about the price of greed and betrayal. Others claim she finally died alone in some forgotten corner of the world, unmourned and unremembered. But in the city where Victor Eze continues his dark work, in that mansion with its hidden room full of bottles, Elena's photograph still floats in its glass prison. Her image is distorted by the dark liquid that surrounds it, her smile twisted into an expression of eternal regret. And sometimes, late at night, visitors to that mansion swear they can hear the sound of a woman crying, not the fresh tears of Victor's current victim, but the dry, endless sobs of a soul that learned too late that some choices can never be undone, some curses can never be broken, and some prices are too terrible to pay. The bottle remains sealed, the padlock strong, and somewhere in the darkness between the living and the dead, Elena continues to pay for the moment she chose wealth over love, luxury over loyalty, and ambition over the family that had loved her unconditionally. Her story serves as a warning to all who hear it. Beware the man who promises you heaven but delivers you to hell. Beware the choices that seem too good to be true. And above all, beware the price of abandoning those who love you for those who merely want to possess you. For in the end, Elena learned the cruelest truth of all, that some mistakes cannot be forgiven, some damage cannot be repaired, and some curses are meant to last forever. Thank you for watching this story. What do you think of this story? Let me know of your thoughts. Until I bring another intriguing story your way again. Bye for now.